Brad Lander thinks it's time for new leadership at City Hall. But before we talk about City Hall politics, I have to talk to you about news that President Trump is thinking of halting congestion pricing. Could he actually do that?
I don't know why President Trump wants us to have more traffic, dirtier air, and crappier subways. Congestion pricing, you can see it working, actually. Traffic is down. There's less congestion. The air is cleaner. And we've got $15 billion to make the subways better and safer. And the federal government did all the reviews it was supposed to do. So he can join New Jersey in going against it in court. But if they look on the merits, they'll say they did the environmental assessment, congestion pricing is working. And I guess I would say he likes a deal. This is a deal that's delivering for our subways. Let's let it play out.
So if he were to try to halt it, do you think that there would be people who would sue to prevent him from doing it? Like yourself, for example.
Yes, we sued last time, and when Governor Hochul put it on pause, we brought the lawsuits that got it off pause. I give her credit for getting it implemented. And yes, we're confident that just like the law was on the side of getting it in operation, the law is on the side of keeping it in operation.
But the difference here is this, that it's a new president, and this president has a Supreme Court that is heavily weighted towards his policies, a 6-3 majority for conservatives. So are you worried that if it were to go to the Supreme Court that you might not prevail?
Look, you never know. This week, the president tried to cut all federal funding for cities and states, child care, school lunch money, everything. And thankfully, they realized quickly they were not on solid legal ground, and they pulled it back. What will the Supreme Court do? We don't know. But what we do know is the legislature passed the law, the governor signed it, the federal government signed off, and now it's reducing congestion.
But here's one other point. So there's a new cast of characters at all the agencies. Lee Zeldin is head of EPA. He ran against Kathy Hochul, complaining about congestion pricing. Mark Molinaro is in line to be head of the Federal Transportation Administration. So I'm sorry, the Federal Highway Administration. So those are two people who would have a role in congestion pricing. Both of them campaigned against congestion pricing. Yeah. Are you worried that that could hurt New York's position?
Yes.
And help the president, and as they advise the president, advising him to kill congestion pricing?
Am I worried? Yes, because I want us to have less traffic and cleaner air and better subways. And if the federal government kills congestion pricing, we're going to have more traffic, dirtier air, and crappier subways. But I hope Donald Trump doesn't want that so much, and that they just say, look, they made the deal, we blasted it, but it's working. Let's see how it plays out.
But don't you think it's better? You know, the business community is 100% for congestion pricing. So don't you think that if business leaders were to talk to him, business leader to business leader, they might be able to convince him that it's good for the economy of New York?
Look, that's what Kathy Wild said yesterday in the press, that there are business leaders talking to him and saying, you know, look, we know Molinaro and we know Zeldin. Okay, they're doing what they have to do politically. Folks in the suburbs, they don't like this that much. Okay, but take a look. You like a good deal. You can see traffic is down. You can see $15 billion to fix the subways we need. Just let it play out. So I hope that's what happens.
So another thing that President Trump has discussed, the Justice Department is apparently negotiating to drop, or talking with the U.S. Attorney here, to drop the charges against Mayor Eric Adams. If they were to do that, how do you think that would affect the mayoral campaign, which you are heavily involved in?
Yeah. Well, let's be clear. First, New Yorkers deserve to know whether their mayor sold them out to the Turkish government, right? That's what's alleged here, is that in exchange for illegal straw donor campaign contributions, he got upgrades on flights. And worse than that, we found when we did an investigation that the Turkish consulate's the only building that was given a temporary certificate of occupancy without a fire safety plan. So New Yorkers deserve to know if their mayor sold them out for illegal campaign contributions, and that's why the prosecution should move forward. But if the Trump administration dismisses it, I still think New Yorkers are going to say, this is a mayor who's selling us out every day, who's so desperate for a pardon, he won't even stand up when the president takes our lunch money.
So, but here's the question I have. So if they drop the case and there's no charges, and he can go around and say, I'm innocent, there's no charges. Wait, does he then go to the Campaign Finance Board and say, free up the money, I should get matching funds.
But you're not innocent if you plea for a pardon.
But this wouldn't be a pardon. This would be dismissing the case.
The charges are being dropped. I don't think that anyone, I don't think the Campaign Finance Board will think that think he's innocent. I don't think New Yorkers will think he's innocent. I don't think he'll think he's innocent.
So do you think that this is going to have an effect on the campaign, or just will continue the cloud that's over the mayor?
Look, New Yorkers are fed up every day because the housing has cost a huge amount, and it takes longer than ever for the housing department even to get people in housing. And he promised child care, and he's cut $300 million from the child care budget. Homelessness and mental health on the subway is worse than ever. New Yorkers were done with Eric Adams even before these corruption scandals, even before we started begging Donald Trump for a pardon. We need a safer city, a more affordable city, and a better mayor, and that's why I'm running. So
here's another question. Speaking of the campaign, there's the person that everybody's worried about entering the race, Andrew Cuomo. Do you think he's going to run, and what effect will it have on your game plan?
Look, I'm running because I think New Yorkers want someone with a demonstrated track record of leadership and management on the issues they care about. My whole career on affordable housing, on safer neighborhoods, on better schools. I've got this track record of making government run better, and no nonsense, no corruption, real public integrity. I don't think people want to trade one corrupt chaos agent in Eric Adams for another corrupt chaos agent. I mean, Andrew Cuomo, he eliminated 1,000 inpatient psychiatric beds with his Medicaid cuts. He devastated the subway. That's why we had the summer of hell, sent those COVID patients to their deaths, and then lied to their families about it to cover it up. And then the sexual harassment. He's just in it for himself, not for New Yorkers, and I don't think that's what New Yorkers want.
But you have a situation where the polls, I guess it must be name recognition, say that he would handily defeat everybody. But what are your polls showing? I mean, your polls must show that he's ahead as well, but what does it show for you?
Yeah. So our internal polling shows that I've got the best chance to beat him, and that what New Yorkers want is somebody with integrity, with a real track record of delivering on housing and safety for New Yorkers, as I've done in the Comptroller's office. Time and again, we made sure that Eric Adams wasn't able to give out those no-bid emergency contracts, save taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars, made our housing programs run better. So our internal polling says that's what New Yorkers want, that we don't want corruption and chaos. Yes, Andrew Cuomo has name recognition, but he's just in it for himself, not for us. And that's why I'm running to be the next mayor.
And we only have a little bit of time left, but you want ethics reform.
Well, we clearly need ethics reform. That's not hard to see. We need to clean up our lobbying laws. We can't let New York taxpayers, taxpayers have spent $28 million on Andrew Cuomo's defense against his sexual harassment charges. He even subpoenaed the gynecology records of his accusers. We should not be letting that happen. So we can clean up City Hall. I've got a plan to do it.
And tell me some of the things in the plan in 30 seconds or less.
Make the Conflicts of Interest Board independent. Don't let the mayor control it, which the mayor does now. Give the Conflicts of Interest Board oversight of sexual harassment and corruption. It can't be at City Hall. Close the lobbying loopholes, and restore the press, the transparency that it used to have.
What chance do you have, if you were elected, of doing all of
that? I will do all those things in my first 100 days.
You promise?
I do.
Okay, well, we're going to have to leave it right there for now. But our conversations continue right after the show on our streaming channel, CBS News New York. We're back with New York City Comptroller and candidate for mayor, Brad Lander. One of the things that's also been going on in this area and in the region has been the deportation of immigrants. At first, it seemed like the president was focusing on people who had a criminal past, but then his press secretary had a press conference where she said that even people who are here illegally should be considered criminals, meaning that there could be an expansion of the deportation, mass deportation. What effect would that have on New York City's economy? Do you think people understand that?
I don't. We did a review, and over $61 billion of our economic value in the city is generated by immigrants. You got people who are taking care of seniors, who are doing construction of new homes, who are preparing the food in the restaurants, who are delivering it. And if you lose those people, 40% of the city is immigrants, and many of them, have someone in the family who's not documented. About 500,000 New Yorkers, some of them kids who've grown up here their whole lives. And yeah, people are afraid to go to school. I heard street vendors afraid to just go out and sell empanadas. What it means to our city, it's really frightening.
But I don't think people understand the economic impact. I looked at a study that was done in 2022, and basically it said that immigrants contributed $3.1 billion in New York State and local taxes.
Yeah.
That's a huge amount of money.
And again, that $61 billion I mentioned, that's the money that other people are earning in wages or, selling people services.
But doesn't that also affect the national economy as well?
Well, and inflation also, if you deport the people that are construction labor, then the cost of housing is going to go up. If you deport agricultural workers, the cost of food is going to go up. So if the purpose here was to get the cost of living down, this is doing exactly the opposite.
So let's switch gears a minute. You have a lot of campaign programs that you want to talk about. One of the things that I'm concerned about is street homeless and efforts that can be made to deal with people with mental health problems. You have a plan, Housing First.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, so our plan, Safer for All, would end street homelessness for people with serious mental illness in New York City. I know that's a big promise, but we can actually do it. We dug in and looked. There's about 2,000 people in the city that are either unsheltered, sleeping on the street with serious mental illness, or at Rikers or in a hospital, but when they come out, they probably will be. And
so we're talking about 4,000 people.
Even fewer than that, we think about 2,000 people. Now, look, sometimes you need to be able to do involuntary hospitalization or secure detention. The mayor was supposed to build about 360 beds at H&H that are secure. But most of the time, what they're seeing in cities like Salt Lake City and Houston and Denver is if you give people a single-room occupancy apartment with services, 70 to 90% of the time, they stay stably housed. And Eric Adams did a pilot that's working, but they really are putting housing last. And that means, unfortunately, what's ahead of it is jail and the street and the subway and the hospitals. And people just keep falling through the cracks. This Housing First model gets people connected to stable housing with services, and then they're off the streets and subways.
Can the city afford it?
It'll actually cost us less money because jail and hospital are insanely expensive, much more than supportive housing.
About $100 million?
So $100 million is what we need to add to the system, but we're already basically spending $2 billion on jail and hospitalization.
Another proposal that you've made that I find intriguing is that you think that the pension funds should help to fund housing for people who are city workers who've worked here at least 5 years. How does that work? Because how does the pension funds recoup their money?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite proposals. There's universities that do this with their endowments. That's where we got the idea. The housing, it keeps appreciating. So let's say that there's a teacher who could get a mortgage for $400,000, but there's no home that costs $400,000. They get that mortgage. The city pension funds put up the other $400,000. Now that teacher can pay $800,000, buy the home and live in it a few years. A few years later, it's going to go up in value. Now it's $1 million. When that teacher sells it, they'll get half. Now their $400,000 has become $500,000, and the pension fund gets the other half. So our $400,000 has become $500,000. Real estate in New York City is a good investment, and this means we could double the purchasing power of our teachers and cops and firefighters.
But here's the fly in the ointment. The fly in the ointment is that they have to sell the house. So what if they decide to live in the house for their whole life?
Well, the thing
when
about
does the pension fund get the money back?
The pension funds are long-term investments. We have obligations that go out 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years, and every year we only need a little of it in cash. This is what investments are. Some of our investments are tied up for decades, and in this case, if a few of them have to stay, in that home for a couple of decades, it'll still work to pay off.
So I have this issue that I'd like to, this is my last question, series of questions, but I look at the voting records in New York, and I look at the number of people who actually turn out to vote in city elections and in city council elections. It's really low.
Really low.
How can you appeal to New Yorkers if only a small segment actually vote? And what would you be prepared to do to try to increase voter participation so that you feel that you have a mandate, not just 10% of the voters in New York voting for you?
Yeah, this is about going out everywhere. So yesterday, I was on 3rd Avenue and 149th Street in the Bronx, like ground zero at Roberto Clemente Plaza for a lot of the problems we're seeing, mental health, substance abuse. And I'm out there talking to small business owners and people in the neighborhood. And all of a sudden, a woman's coming around the corner in her car, I kid you not, stops basically in the middle of the street, gets out of the car, and it's like, "Controller, I need to talk to you about something." So I found that so encouraging, and like, it's our responsibility in this campaign to go everywhere and say, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to end street homelessness with people with serious mental illness. Here's my plan to make homeownership possible for teachers and cops and firefighters. Here's how we're going to deliver child care to every working family. Here's how we're going to restore trust to City Hall. A lot of New Yorkers want that, even if they don't typically vote, and it's on us to get out there and talk to them.
But see, here's the issue. There are so many candidates running for mayor, and there's a lot of noise, and it's hard to get to break through.
It is.
And I guess my question is, how are you going to get your views to the voter so they understand what you stand for as opposed to all the others, and while you think your proposals are better, they think their proposals are better, but it's difficult to get them to actually focus and then to actually go to the polls. Yeah. I've looked at some voter turnout in like council districts. Some people win with 1,000 votes.
Yes.
1,000. I saw one person won with 365 votes in the Bronx.
Look, it's our job to go everywhere. And I've got the extra challenge. Not only am I telling them my ideas are the best, but I'm like, I've got this demonstrated leadership experience of making my ideas actually happen in the council, and especially as controller. That's what that pension fund idea for homeownership comes from. But that means I got to go everywhere. I love coming on with you. I love being in the South Bronx. We did a Diwali event in Southeast Queens. I'm in churches. Like, that's our job, is to make people see this is why it matters. Look, people feel the problems. They're fed up with not feeling safe in their neighborhoods, with the housing and childcare being out of control. They know City Hall is corrupt right now. So it's on us to reach people in every way, online, offline, in the neighborhoods, in person.
And social media.
And that's what we get to do for the next 5 months.
God bless you. Controller, mayoral candidate Brad Lander, thank you for joining me.
Great to be
and
with
thank
you.
you at home for joining us as well.